And one of the things I used to tell my kids is that the only two things you can control out there on that court are your attitude and your effort. And if you think about that, it's pretty much the same, in life. I mean, on the court, referee may have a bad game, call a couple fouls on you. Now you're sitting on the bench. That's not your fault. But if you're all salty about it, mad about it, and things like that, then you know what? You're totally out of the game. Your head is somewhere else. So, and the other thing I used to tell them was you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to episode 28 of Disrupt the Everyday. On today's episode, we're joined by an incredible human being with an incredible story. Today, we are joined by Terry Tucker. Terry, thank you for joining us today.
Brian, Tanya, thank you very much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
And likewise. Now, we're going to ask you the loaded question to open up. Who is Terry Tucker?
Well, I'll try to give you the Reader's Digest version of it. So I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. I am the oldest of three boys. You cannot tell this from looking at me, but I'm 6'8" tall. Played college basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. I have a brother who's 6'7", who pitched for the University of Notre Dame. And then I have another brother who's 6'6", who was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5". So if you sat behind our family growing up in church, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on in front. So, but really my 5'8" mother was the boss, and whatever she said went. So after I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, and I was all set to make my mark in the world with my newly obtained business administration degree, and I look back now and think what a knucklehead I was for thinking I knew anything about business just because I had a degree. Fortunately, I was able to find that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. But unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. In my professional life, as I said, I was in the marketing department at Wendy's. I was a hospital administrator. I was a customer service manager. I was a police officer. And while I was a police officer, I was an undercover narcotics investigator. I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator. I had my own school security consulting business. I was a girls' high school basketball coach, motivational speaker. Last year, I became an author. But for the last 9 years, I pretty much considered myself a cancer warrior. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for almost 28 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is a lieutenant in the new branch of the military here in the U.S., the Space Force.
Well, that's awesome. And
Yeah.
there's so much there, but there's a lot of things that stuck out for me, but I'm just curious, how did you do undercover work being 6'8"?
Isn't that the $1 million question, right? And I get that all the time. And the thing about that industry, and it's an industry, is that what motivates it is greed. And as long as you have money, you'll find somebody that'll sell you drugs. And sometimes you have to do a little bit of acting. I remember one time I was a policeman in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I posed as a professor of metallurgy from the University of Cincinnati to buy drugs from these kids from Dayton that were coming down. If they would have asked me anything about metal, I don't know anything. It rusts if you leave it out in the rain. That would have been about the extent of my knowledge on metallurgy. So you kind of have to, it's a little bit of acting on top of being kind of a scary little profession there.
And the other thing too that you mentioned that's interesting too, and I think a lot of people take this approach when they're coming out of school, is that a lot of young people feel like, they know it all because they've earned this degree or diploma. And you summed it up great there. And I think there's a reason why they call it commencement when you're graduating, because it's really just the beginning of your knowledge. And I think that really speaks to, your career too, because you moved into so many different places. You had a lot of really diverse experience.
Yeah, I did. And a lot of that had to do with my father, to be honest with you. So my grandfather, his father was a Chicago policeman from 1924 to 1954. So he was in Chicago during Prohibition, when alcohol was not allowed in the United States, during the Great Depression in the 30s. And when the gangsters were shooting up the town. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. And my dad, it wasn't a serious injury, he was shot in the ankle. But my dad remembered the stories his mom told of, the knock on the door, Mrs. Tucker, please grab your son. Your husband's been shot and come with us. So my dad was, you're absolutely not going into law enforcement. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. You're going to get a job in business. You're going to get married, have 2.4 kids, live in a house in the suburbs. I mean, he had it all mapped out, but that's what he wanted for me. And that's not what I believed God put me on this earth to do. And really that was law enforcement. So as I mentioned, he was sick when I graduated from college. So I didn't want to upset him. I knew he didn't want this for me out of spite. It was out of love. He wanted something good for me, but I waited until he passed away. My first two jobs were in business because that's what he wanted. And then when he passed away, I got into law enforcement, and I was a 37-year-old rookie police officer.
And what did your mom say when you told her that you were going in to policing?
I think her words were, "Oh my God," something like that were her exact words. But my mom was supportive. My wife was certainly supportive of it. I mean, you think about it. My wife married me when I was a hospital administrator. Suit and tie guy, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and hey, hon, I'd like to work nights and weekends and miss, Christmas and things like that. And just extremely supportive of me. But yeah, my mom she went with it. I'm not going to tell you she was thrilled about it, but I think she knew it was my passion. It was something I wanted to do. So she went along with it and didn't give me too much of a hard time about it.
Yep.
Right. So obviously there is some bumps along the way. It wasn't smooth sailing for you. From a career perspective, you did a few different things, and you said too, you refer to yourself as a cancer warrior. So can you talk to us about that? Can we unpack that a bit?
Sure. So 2012, I am a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. Didn't really give it a lot of thought because as a coach, you're on your feet quite a bit. But after a couple of weeks, it didn't heal. I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, and he took an x-ray and he said, I think you have a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a gelatin sac with what looked like white fat in it. No blood, no dark spots, nothing that would give rise to any concern at all. But he sent it off to pathology. And then 2 weeks later, he called me. And the more difficulty he was having telling me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming, until finally he just pretty much laid it out. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years and I have never seen this form of cancer. You have a very rare form of melanoma, which most people think of as, some type of a skin, you're out in the sun too much and things like that. Well, there's a rare form of that disease that appears on the bottom of your feet or the palms of your hands. And there's even a rarer form that appears in your mucous membrane, so in your nose or your mouth, but it's still melanoma. So he said, I think you should go to MD Anderson in Houston and be treated for it. I did. I had a surgery to remove the tumor on the bottom of my foot, and then another one to remove all the lymph nodes in my groin. And when I healed, I was put on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon to help keep the disease from coming back. Interferon for me was just a horrible, nasty, debilitating drug that basically gave me flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And that was just to keep the disease from coming back. That wasn't, here, take this and it'll cure you. 2017, it did come back when I stopped. The interferon ended up being so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a fever of 108 degrees, which fortunately it was a level 1 trauma center and they were able to stabilize me. 2018, I had my left foot amputated. 2019, it came back again in my shin, 2 more surgeries. And then last year, an undiagnosed tumor in my ankle grew large enough that it fractured my tibia. And my only recourse at that point in time, right in the middle of the pandemic, was to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I also found out I had tumors in my lungs at that time. So that's pretty much my 9-year progression through cancer. And on that uplifting story, what's your next question?
I was going to say, so where are things now with your health?
So I am on a clinical trial now. I initially started on chemotherapy, and that helped a little bit. And then I was switched to a clinical trial drug that I've been on since November of last year. And it has helped somewhat with the tumors in my lungs. It shrunk them by about 30%, but my doctor's not talking about a cure. He's just talking about being able to buy me some more time. And, the last several CAT scans have really not shown any great improvement in the tumors, but they haven't spread and they're not getting any bigger. So I'll take that as a win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, my father, he passed away in 2019. But I remember prior to that, he had his left leg amputated as well below the knee. Okay. And the one thing that I remember when he was going through all of that was he just kept, he was excited about the fact that he was still going to be able to drive.
Yeah. It's the other leg, right? Yeah, exactly.
And I know he was still pretty active with it. He growing up, he was someone who did home improvements. That was kind of the main thing that he did. So he was on ladders a lot, and still was that way until like the very end. One of the stories that I had heard just before his funeral was, he was doing some work in Nova Scotia. He was up on a roof and his leg fell off, went over the side. So he had to get somebody to pass it back up to him so he could get back down. But
a little help, yeah, I could. And I bet your father had the sense of humor to be able to laugh at something like that too, right? Didn't he?
Oh yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh man. So this has been quite the journey. I mean, this is our first time meeting. You look healthy. You look like great spirits. What has kept you going during these last 9 years?
So I really kind of attribute the fact that I've gotten this far. And again, if you look at me as you are now on Zoom, above the waist, I look normal. And even when I was on chemotherapy, I got the whole, you're going to lose your hair. I never lost my hair. I mean, I kept going to my doctor. When am I going to lose my hair? And he was like, some people just don't. And you happen to be one of those people. So I got lucky in that regard. But there are a few things that I guess I feel have gotten me to this point. One is what I call the 3 F's, which are faith, family, and friends. And the other thing is what I call my 4 truths. And these are 4 things that I've really kind of learned, I guess, about myself or about my situation over the last 9 years. And I'll give them to you real quick. They're just one sentence each. But I use them to kind of make decisions about how I'm going to be treated or what I'm going to get involved in project-wise and stuff like that. So the first one is control your mind or it will control you. The second one is embrace the pain and discomfort that we all experience in life and use that to make you a stronger and more determined individual. The third one is, and I've just added this one fairly recently, is what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. So I use those truths to help me out. And I had a nurse recently come to me and say, Terry, this trial drug is really beating you up. And it does beat me up for an entire week. She said, nobody would think anything less of you if you got off of it, if you quit it. And I tried to explain the truths to her, but I could tell they didn't hit home. They didn't resonate. And I told her, I said, my doctor may take me off this drug or I may die on this drug, but I'm not going to quit this drug. 1, because it's helping me. And 2, that's just not the kind of person I am. I'm not wired to quit things. And as long as it continues to help me, my doctor will make the medical decision whether we need to take you off of it. But other than that, it's full steam ahead. Let's go. I don't like it, but it's just something that, like the second truth, you take that pain, you flip it inside, and you use it as energy, or you burn it as fuel to make you stronger.
Love that.
Now, one thing too that I was just thinking of as you were talking was the Steve Jobs quote. Now I'll paraphrase it because I don't have it in front of me, but basically that you can't connect the dots when you're in the situation or when you're looking forward. So again, I'm really paraphrasing. This isn't how he said it at all, but it's essentially that when you're looking back at a situation is then when you can actually connect the dots. So I don't know if you feel that way, but I'm just thinking in terms of how things happened for you. You had this rare form of cancer, and you happened to be, I'm guessing is because it was geographic, somewhat determined that way, but you went to MD Anderson, which is one of the best cancer hospitals in the world.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because I go to the University of Colorado Hospital now, and it's like a mini me version of MD Anderson. MD Anderson is a city amongst itself, and unbelievable people there, cutting edge technology, cutting edge procedures and things like that. But navigating it was difficult. The University of Colorado is much easier for me. And I like being at a university setting because they're doing things. They're doing like this clinical trial that I'm on. It's helping somewhat, but there's also more tools in the toolbox. If it gets to a point where it's not working, what else can we look at? What other trials are out there? And from what I understand, there's quite a few trials for melanoma itself and for solid tumor cancers. And Moderna's working on a vaccine that they harvest part of your tumor, develop a vaccine specifically for you and your genetic profile, and then give you that vaccine with the hope that you will be cured from that.
Yeah, that's amazing stuff. Now, the other thing too, again, you've obviously had a very, very eventful life, and you're sharing what you've learned. You recently authored a book as well. Can you talk to us about that? We'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. So again, first book I've ever written. The book was really born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player who had moved to the Colorado area where my wife and I live. And we'd had dinner with her and her fiance a couple of times. And I remember saying to her one day, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. And she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she's like, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Your life should be figuring out why you were put on this earth. And then once you figure that out, live that purpose. So that was one conversation. And then I had another connection with a young man from college on LinkedIn who asked me what I thought were the most important things he should learn to not only be successful in his job or in business, but in life overall. And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. Not that those aren't important. They are. They're incredibly important. But I kind of felt that they had been done and done quite a bit. So I wanted to try to give him something that actually went deeper, maybe something that got into his soul. And so I waited for a while and I wrote some notes. And eventually I had these 10 thoughts, these 10 principles, and I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back and I was like, well, I've got a life story that fits under this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So I had my leg amputated in April 2020, started chemotherapy for the tumors in my lungs in June of 2020. And during that 3-month period that I was healing, I basically sat down at the computer and started to build stories under these principles. And that's how sustainable excellence, the 10 principles to leading your uncommon and extraordinary life, came about.
Wow. That's awesome. And, just thinking back to people who are in that recovery phase, right? And it's that mind over matter. And yes, I get it. You have to rest and all that kind of stuff. But when you're focused, you can attest to this, but when you focus your energy on something else, maybe it's not that the pain decreases, but you're thinking and you're doing, and the time passes and did that help you, in your recovery, do you think?
It did. I mean, I certainly could have sat around and watched Netflix, for 3 months, but I really felt that, and I always say that I wrote the book, but I really felt that it was inspired by something much bigger than me. In my case, I really think, it was inspired by God. And, there's sort of that old joke that goes, when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. And, so I mean, God never talked to me, but what I think God did was put people in my path that said, hey, you ought to write a book. Hey, you ought to write a book. Hey, you ought to write a book. And, you get to a point, I think I'm smart enough that when multiple people start saying that, I kind of perk up and think, maybe there's a reason that, or maybe that's coming from something or someone or some entity or God that's saying that, and I ought to pay attention to it. And so that's really, it was kind of like, I always say, guys, like, sit down here at the computer, dummy, and just do what I tell you, and kind of, type away, and here you go, here's your book. So I really think it was something much bigger than me.
Hey, could we get a sneak peek inside the book? Could you share some of the principles with us?
No, can't do. So sure, absolutely. So it's funny. I did a podcast earlier today, and I was talking to the host about it. And when people see the principles, it's funny because like one resonates for me. It's kind of my go-to principle all the time. But as people see them, they pick another one. It's like, no, this one resonates with me, or that one resonates with me. And it's fun for me to watch people kind of say, well, this is the one, this is my go-to principle, and things like that. The one that I go to a lot, and the one that I think is real important, and I think I go to it because I did it a lot, was most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I know I've done that. I know they're, I want to do this, but kind of scares me a little bit. Or what will people think about me if I'm not successful in that regard, and things like that. So I've probably done it a lot over my life. Probably most people have, where they're a little apprehensive, and I'm not going to do that. I'll just stay over here. I'll stay safe. And, it kind of goes back to that first truth that I talked about controlling your mind, or it will control you. Our brains know our fears. They know our insecurities. They know our vulnerabilities. And to the brain, the status quo is good. The way things are, don't mess with it, stay good, everything's fine. But anytime you want to grow, you've got to step outside that status quo. And as soon as you do, your brain starts kicking in. It's like if you want to find a new job, I'm in a dead-end job, I'm not going to get anywhere. I need to grow, so I need to find a new job. What's your brain going to do? Wait a minute, Tanya, you shouldn't take that new job because, hey, you might not get along with people at the new company, and things here at this job are great. You understand the routine and you're making good money. That's what your brain does. And I think it's important that you recognize that your brain is putting these negative thoughts into your mind, because if you think about it, your mind can only hold one thought at a time. Why would you make it a negative thought? And then once you realize it's coming in, you need to flip that switch and say, no, you know what? I'm at a dead-end job. It makes total sense for me to look for employment outside here because I need to grow. I need to get better. I want to improve my skills. I want to improve my stat. Whatever it is, that's why I want to do this. So it's funny how the brain works and how it sort of plays us against itself. And I learned that early. I learned that when I was like 15 years old and I had knee surgeries, and I was a good basketball player, but my brain was like, I think you're probably a step slower, or, coaches aren't going to want to recruit you because, you've had these knee surgeries. And I had to flip that switch. No, I'm still playing at an elite level, and coaches are still calling and sending me mail wanting to recruit me. So you kind of have to flip the switch and realize when that stuff's happening that it's just not good for you.
It's so true. Now, I have a question. So I'm thinking about your recovery process, and let me know if you don't feel comfortable answering.
You can ask me anything you want.
I'm the opposite sex here. And I know from men, when, you get sick and all that kind of stuff, not always the first one to go to the hospital, to the doctor. And then when it's something as serious as yours, being the man of the family, the father, the provider, all that kind of stuff. Did it seem like a role reversal to you? And if so, how did you work through that with your wife?
Oh, my wife wears the pants in the family. So, I mean, that was totally, no. So, I mean, my wife and and I think I alluded to this before, we have a very good supportive relationship of each other. We've moved several times for my wife's job. And, that was me supporting her. Again, her supporting me wanting to go in law enforcement. But if I back up and answer your question sort of from my father's perspective, absolutely. My dad, was of a generation where men didn't go to the doctor. And my dad was literally diagnosed with end stage breast cancer back in the 1980s. And doctors were like, man with breast cancer, we have no idea how to treat this. I mean, they thought maybe it was hormonal, like it is somewhat in women. And they removed his testicles to see if that would do it. I mean, some of the things they did, were just kind of bizarre. But, he knew he was sick, but he didn't go to the doctor. And, literally, my brothers and I told you about how, tall and big we are. We literally told them, it's like, you're going to the doctor tomorrow and we don't want any lip about it because we're bigger and stronger than you are. And if that means carrying you to the doctor, that's what we're going to do. But it was way too late at that point in time to save his life. But one of the things I learned from watching my dad is that he lived for another 3.5 years after basically been giving a terminal diagnosis. And I think the reason he did is because he had a purpose. He went to work up to 2 weeks before he died. And I always sort of tuck that in the back of my mind that, it doesn't matter what the doctors tell you, you got 6 months, you got a year, whatever like that. The doctors don't know you. They don't know your mind. They don't know your resolve. They don't know that, your daughter's getting married in a year and you want to be there for that and you're going to stick around for that. So that's just a number. And I always kind of throw that out when people say that because they said it about my dad and it was totally ridiculous. But having that purpose was extremely important for him. And it's been extremely important for me to have the same, be able to do something other than sit around and watch Netflix.
Yeah, no, you definitely channeled that energy and have done a lot of positive stuff with it for sure. Now, I have a kind of an unusual question for you, but
Go for it.
Just thinking in terms of, everything that you've been through, do you have a favorite failure? And I guess the way to frame that is there something that's went wrong in your life or something that was, again, just went wrong or didn't go as planned that, you can look back on now, again, connecting the dots after the fact that you can say was beneficial for you, even though you didn't see it at the time?
Yeah, I did. As I mentioned, received a full scholarship, 4-year scholarship to play basketball in college. I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, but that almost didn't happen because I went to a military college, and I get down there as a freshman and, the first thing they do is shave your head and you're marching and, I've had knee surgery and I'm like, I came here to play basketball, which again, no, you notice I didn't say I came here to go to school. I came here to play basketball, and that again showed the lack of maturity that I had at that point in time. And I was going to quit. And I had never quit anything in my life. I'd had 3 knee surgeries in high school, battled back from that to play basketball and be able to go to college and play. And I was going to quit. And I said, I was literally walking over to tell the coaches that I was done. I was going to leave. And I decided to stop at the student union and see if I had any mail. And I had a letter from my father. My father had never written me a letter in his life. And so I took it and I went up to the top of the field house and I'm literally, in the nosebleed seats up there. And I opened this letter and my dad basically writes this 7-page handwritten letter that basically says, pull your head out, that you've called home 7 times since you've been there. And not once have you asked how anybody here is doing. You are so in your head right now and thinking this is all about you that, you have a 4-year scholarship to get a college degree. I love you. I'm proud of you. It went on and on and on. I'm crying like a baby. I was crying like a baby up there. And I'm like, I am literally 50 feet from the coach's office that I was going to originally go to and tell them I was quitting. And I read this letter and I'm like, absolutely not. Fold the letter up, got the hanky out, dried off the eyes and blew the nose. And I'm like, all right, we're going back at it. 4 years later, I graduated. So there was almost that fail there of quitting. But in a lot of ways, I kind of feel that was God too. God was like, I'm going to give you this letter, your choice. There's the coach's office, you can quit, or here's your father's letter. What are you going to do?
And we all get those pep talks at certain times, right? It
Yeah.
could come in letter form. It could be a phone call, a text message, right? And it's always at that right time when you need it. And just to help you get over that hurdle to keep going, right? And then you look back, whatever that situation is, and it's like, I'm so glad I kept going. I'm so glad I didn't quit, right?
Oh, absolutely. I just, but I think the important thing there is the choice.
Mhm.
It's your choice. I had two options. Here's my father's letter. I'm proud of you. You have a full scholarship. Or here's the coach's office. You can go and quit. It's your choice. Nobody's going to make it for you. It's your choice what you want to do. I think I made the right choice, but think about how differently my life would be right now if I had made the other choice.
Yeah, and it's just, again, interesting. It's just looking at back at when you're looking back at it, connecting those dots, because your father obviously didn't write that letter with the intention of getting it just before you're about to
Mhm.
quit, right?
Right.
But had he sent that letter a day later, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. He could have been driving down to South Carolina to pick me up because I'm going home. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
But yeah, it's just funny when you look back and you see those things. Now, again, that's a great lesson. But what is, and again, I'm thinking of my dad a lot when we're having this conversation. But what do you think is probably the most or some of the most valuable lessons that he taught you throughout your life?
I think the biggest thing he and my mom taught us was the importance of family. That having three boys and all of us involved in sports, and a lot of times it was divide and conquer. All right, I'm going to go to this game, you're going to go to that game, but there was always somebody there to support and to be there. And I remember when I'd graduated from college, I had my job at Wendy's. Here I am, I'm wearing suits to work. I'm somebody and all that kind of stuff. And I remember one day I told my dad, my youngest brother had a high school basketball game. And I told my dad, I said, I'm not going to Brian's game. I'm going to go work out. It's been a few days. I need the workout. And my dad, he's sick and, he's dying. And he's like, no, you're not. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm an adult. I'm making my own decisions. I have my own job. It's like, no, you're going to the game. No, Dad, I'm going to work out. No, you're not. Now, my dad was 6'5", about 250 pounds. So, you didn't say no to Dad very often, but, I was still bigger and stronger at this point than he was, but he was right. And I didn't go work out. I went to my brother's game because that's what we did. That was the importance of family, of being there for each other. And so, when you had tough times, when you were like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this, your family's back there. They've got your back. Go ahead and do that, and we'll support you. We'll be there for you. I mean, I remember when I was 13 years old, I was 6'5". I had a size 14 skinny foot, and my ears looked like Dumbo. I mean, my head had not caught up with my ears, and I got teased mercilessly because of my physical appearance at that point in time. Now, I put my effort into basketball, but I'll tell you, my brothers were always there defending me. I think they were at the principal's office more than they were in class because they were always getting in fights for, protecting their brother and stuff like that. But that's the importance of family. That's the importance of loving each other unconditionally. I'll be there for you no matter what happens.
I love that. I appreciate that because I think nowadays it's oh, well, whatever works for you, right? Even if you do have your family's best interests, it's putting, being selfless, right?
It
And
is.
yeah, I think that's a characteristic that a lot of us struggle with, right? Because it's like, what am I going to do for myself? What am I going to do to make my business better and all that? And even if you don't actually have that, thought, realizing even that you're doing it, sometimes it just happens on its own, right?
It
So
does.
yeah, I think that's such a big thing for kids and just to have that instilled in them that yes, it's family, and we do have a good family in it, but sometimes you're going to have to do things for your family even when you don't want to, right?
You do. I mean, I remember our daughter who unfortunately got my height and is 6'2" and actually went to the Air Force Academy to play basketball. And when she made that decision, I said, okay, there were other schools that were recruiting her. I said, you're going to have to call those coaches and let them know that you've made the decision to go to the Air Force Academy. And of course, she's a teenager in today's society. No, Dad, I'll just send them a text. I'm like, oh, no, you won't. Oh, no, you won't. You're going to get them on the phone, and literally we had a role play how, what to do, because she was not comfortable being on the phone. She was comfortable, doing this. Yeah. And it was a good lesson for her, because there were a couple of coaches, especially smaller schools, that got mad at her. And I'm thinking, okay, that's good, because obviously they didn't have your best interest, mind. You're playing, Division I basketball at a great academic school, and they're mad at you. I mean, they couldn't have provided you with either the basketball part or the academic part. Why wouldn't they be happy for you? So I thought it was good for her. And, I always tell, especially young parents, I said, if I can give you one piece of advice, remember this: you're their parent, you're not their friend. You're going to have to make those tough choices, and they're going to stomp off and slam the door and say they hate you. And that's when you just look at them and say, well, I made that choice because I love you.
And that's when you say after, oh, wow, I sound like my parents right now. Oh, man. And I also, my kids, lately, it's been like, okay, guys, life lesson alert, right? Life lesson moment. And, blah, 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 blah. Just remember, when this comes up, this is how, you should deal with it or approach it. Because, yeah, kids nowadays, that's how your daughter and every other kid, I think, would think, let's text. No. In these business type situations, we got to make a phone call, as awkward as it may be, right? So
it is, and I've had, being in law enforcement, I've had young people say, I'd like to be a policeman. What would you recommend, for me to get ready? And I always tell them put that down. Go out on the street and talk to the homeless guy, and go up to the penthouse and talk to that guy. Because if you can talk to those two, opposite ends of the spectrum people, you'll be a good cop. Because no cop is going to be able to do his job, texting somebody. You're going to have to talk to people. And so many young people today can't do that.
Mm-hmm. I know so much of, the journey that you've been through, I'm sure, has obviously shaped the way that you approach life and the way that you think of things. So, and I have a bit of a bizarre question here, but it's been kind of on my mind for the last little bit. Sure. Now, okay, we'll do a little bit of a scenario here. So we'll do the Matrix scenario. You have the red pill, the blue pill, so if you, going back to when this journey started, the red pill is going to take away all of this. You're not going to have to go through the cancer process. You're not going to have to go through cancer. You're not going to have to, grow the way you have, adapt to all of this. And then the blue pill, again, you just go on as life, with the life that you've led, but you have the perspective of knowing who you are today. Would you make all of this go away, or would you embark on this journey?
I would embark on this journey. This, as much as, there's kind of that old Winston Churchill quote that says, when you're going through hell, keep going. That's kind of the way I feel. Cancer it has sucked, don't get me wrong, but it has made me a better person. It has made me appreciate even more. And I think I was pretty intuitive or emotionally, had the emotional intelligence to know what was important in life. I think my parents gave that to me, and my wife and I have had that kind of a relationship, but I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't wish it on anybody else, but it's made me a better person, and it's taught me a lot of things. And now I'm taking what I've learned, and because of good people like you that let me come on your podcast, I can get that information out into the world.
Right. Yeah. And you can impact so many other people. And again, this quote this week, it's weird. This quote just keeps coming up, but it's a Tupac Shakur quote, actually. So a little bit, not quite Winston Churchill, but, but Tupac's quote was, I may not change the world, but I'll spark the mind of someone who will change the world. So
Yeah.
really, like, and it's what you're doing right now. You're taking everything that you've learned, and they're just sharing it with others and making your mark on the world, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I think my passion, my purpose, my why was to be in law enforcement, and I did that. But now my passion and my purpose is to put as much goodness, as much positivity, as much love, as much peace back into the world. And you know, that's not an easy thing. You know, I mean, I was a cop. I was on SWAT. I was about, you know, I mean, to kind of talk about love and peace and goodness and stuff like that. Tanya, going back to the kind of the guy thing, you know, I mean, really is not, you know, was something that took a while, but I think it's important because my doctor a couple months ago showed me my CAT scan from back in 2020 of my lungs. And I remember, can't read a lot of it, but I remember looking at it and I kind of looked at him and I'm like, how was I alive? He's like, I have no idea. You know, so what that told me was God's not done with me yet. And people were like, you know, do you worry about dying? I don't worry about dying at all because of the fact that I found my purpose in life and I lived it. So dying is just it's the next step. It's what's on the other side of this life. So it's okay to be scared a little bit. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want to die. I'm not going to hasten that. But when it comes, it's not something that I'm going to be like, oh yeah, because I found my purpose. And you know, I've seen a lot of people die as a policeman and in my cancer journey. And I'm going to make huge generalizations now, but the people who die, what I would consider probably what you would consider happy or peaceful deaths, seem to be the people that found their purpose in life and lived it. And the people who, you know, they want another day or another month or another year, those are the people that never did anything with their life. You know, they never tried to find the reason that God put them on the face of this earth and lived that. And so now here at the end, they're kind of, you know, grabbing for that rope of, it's too late by that time. There's an old Native American Blackfoot proverb that goes, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I want to be at the end of my life.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Now, I got another weird scenario for you. Sorry, but
Go for it.
So I want to go back to when you actually first got your diagnosis. So obviously, again, you weren't really expecting things to go that way from the sounds of it. But again, you get that news, the shock setting in, and you go, you know, you're at the hospital, you go sit down in the cafeteria, and Terry Tucker from 2021 takes a seat beside you. What does Terry Tucker from 2021 tell Terry Tucker who just received that diagnosis?
This is going to be a heck of a ride. I mean, really, this is going to be, you know, the ups, the downs, you know, they're going to be, you know, those days, those minutes, those seconds where you don't think you can go on. I remember recently reading about supposedly in the 1950s, there was a professor at Harvard who did a study with rats. And what he did is he took rats and he put them in a tank of water that were over their head. And he wanted to see how long they would tread water. And it was roughly about 15 minutes for each rat. And then right as they were getting ready to go under, he pulled them out and he dried them off and he let them rest and stuff like that. And then he put them back in the tank. And he was, you know, I want to see how long they'll go now. You know, maybe it'll be 10 minutes because they're tired, or the 5 minutes. And any guesses on how long they went?
I'm going to say an hour.
60 hours.
Wow.
60 hours, because they knew they were going to be rescued. You know, the first time, yeah, right as I was going to be rescued. So I'm going to keep doing this. And what that taught me, and certainly what I've learned, is that, you know, the limits that we have in our lives are the limits that we put on ourselves.
Mhm.
You know, everything you need to be successful in life is already inside you. You just need to find it and pull it out. I mean, sometimes that finding it means going to see somebody, or whether it's a coach or a therapist or something like that, to help you. But everything is there that you need. And there's an old Alexander the Great story about when he was dying, and he brings all his counselors together and he says, I want you to carry out my final 3 wishes. My first wish is that only my physicians carry my coffin to the grave. The second wish is I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones. And the third wish is that my hands are left outside of my coffin. And one of his counselors was like, you're Alexander the Great, you're probably the greatest conqueror of all time. Why do you have such strange wishes? And he said, well, number one, I want people to realize by having my doctors carry me to the grave that no doctor is going to cure anybody. They're just going to help the body to cure itself. He said, the second thing is I've spent my entire life accumulating wealth, getting power and status and all this kind of thing. And yet none of that is coming with me to the next life. And then the final wish of having his hands hanging outside were, I came into this world empty-handed and I pretty much leave it the same way I came into it. So I think that's a really good story about what's important in life. We all want to be successful and have, power and prestige and money and influence. At the end of your life, none of that matters. It's just the love that which you were created in, I think, my opinion, that you get to take with you on your journey after this.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And listening to that, I'm seeing the basketball on the back and I'm like, you must have been such an amazing coach. I'm just thinking like 4th quarter tie game down to the last, 25 seconds. Cause I know in basketball, it goes really slow at the end. And, you must have gave some great epic speeches to those ladies.
Well, it's funny. I had never coached girls. I didn't have any sisters. It was all boys. And I remember when I first started coaching, I was coaching the game and I pointed to one of the players and I'm like, go in for whoever, Smith. And I turned around and I was coaching and stuff like that. And I looked over the score table. There's nobody there. I looked back. I'm like, hey, you go in for, and it's, the girl's shaking me off. I'm like a catcher in a base or a pitcher in a baseball game. It's like, no, I don't want to go in. I'm like, what? Here I am doing a counseling session on this girl about, wait a minute, you come to practice every day. You work hard. You deserve to play in the game. And she's shaking me up. No, coach, I don't want to go in. I don't want to go in. And we're talking face to face. And now she starts crying. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, are you serious? I'm a head basketball coach at a high school. And I'm having a counseling session with one of my players in the middle of a game. I'm like, what have I gotten myself into? But, it's funny because I learned something. Girls play sports for a different reason than boys play sports. Boys are competitive and they want to win. Girls want to be part of the group. We are a team and we're all together and we do things. And it took me a while to learn that. And one of the things I used to tell my kids is that the only 2 things you can control out there on that court are your attitude and your effort. And if you think about that, it's pretty much the same in life. On the court, referee may have a bad game, call a couple fouls on you. Now you're sitting on the bench. That's not your fault. But if you're all salty about it, mad about it, and things like that, then you know what? You're totally out of the game. Your head is somewhere else. So, and the other thing I used to tell them was you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's what practice was about. It's like, why do we have to practice? It's like, so you don't make these mistakes in the game. Like, what do you mean? Why do we have to practice? Why am I answering these questions? It's like,
oh man.
So anyway,
ask the questions, right? Yeah, we're talking about practice,
right? Because you need it. That's why.
Awesome. Now, Terry, obviously, you've kept yourself busy during this whole time. What can we expect from you in the months to come?
So when I wrote Sustainable Excellence, I think it's a book about success. And there's nothing wrong with success. But in a lot of ways, I think I would like my second book and I'm sort of compiling stuff for it right now. I haven't started writing it yet. But I'd like my second book to be more about another word that begins with S that I think is more important than success. And I think that's significance. Success is what we do for ourselves. You're successful parents. I'm successful, whatever I'm successful at. And that's fine. But significance is what we do for other people. Mm-hmm. And I think you can be both. I think you can be successful and significant. But I think I'd like my second book, if God gives me enough time to write it, to be more about significance. So that's my thought. That's what I'd like to do. Plus, our daughter's getting married in the fall, and I'm working with my prosthetic leg to try to be able to walk her down the aisle. So those are my two goals right now.
Those are amazing goals. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Now, Terry, for those of us who want to connect with you, who want to, just even learn more about your journey, what are the best ways to connect with you?
So I have a blog. When I had my foot amputated, I was kind of, laying there in bed every night and like, okay, I was really at a crossroads, didn't know what to do, where I was going, and kind of looked up at the ceiling and was sort of praying like, all right, God, what's next? What's next? And people kept saying, you should start a blog. And I was like, I can barely turn my cell phone on in the morning. What do you mean I should start a blog? And literally the blog was 4 pages. It took me 4 months to do 4 pages because I'd do something like, I don't know what that means. I got to go research it. I'm sure my 25-year-old daughter could have done it in about 15 minutes, but it took me 4 months to put this 4-page blog together. And it's called Motivational Check. And you can get it to it at motivationalcheck.com. And every day I put up a new thought for the day. On Monday, I put up the Monday morning motivational message. And I just put up stories and videos. They're always short because I know people are kind of pressed for time. But if you need a quick shot of inspiration or motivation, go to motivationalcheck.com. You can leave me a message there. You can get access to my book. You can get access to my social media accounts as well.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Terry. We appreciate it and really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you both for having me on. I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.